We looked at the concept of a test cross with a single trait. You can do this with two traits as well. Again, it's impossible to tell by inspection alone whether an individual expressing the dominant allele for two traits is homozygous dominant or heterozygous in regard to these traits. So we have a test cross with an individual homozygous recessive for both traits. That's because if you're homozygous recessive, the genotype and phenotype are determined. So if a man is homozygous dominant for widow's peak and short fingers, and he reproduces with a woman who's homozygous recessive for both traits, then all of his children will have the dominant phenotype. If a man is heterozygous for both traits, then each child has a 25% chance of showing either one or both recessive traits. So if we look at this concept, if he's homozygous dominant for widow's peak and short fingers, that's going to be all capital letters, and there's 4 alleles since there are 2 traits. So the woman who is homozygous recessive for both traits, that's going to be all lowercase letters. So how they're figuring out this, no matter how we combine these, right, for the man, we're only going to get big W, big S for the gamete. Similarly, for the woman, we can only get little w, little s for the gamete. You could draw out a big Punnett square, but it's really unnecessary here since there's only one combination that we're looking at. So no matter how we combine that, we're going to get a dihybrid, right? And so children will have the dominant phenotypes. That is, they'll have widow's peak and short fingers. Let's look at this next example to show how they're getting that each child has a 25% chance of showing either one or both recessive traits. So here's our parents again, and this is looking at the concept of a two-trait test cross. Whether we're looking at hairline and finger length or the presence of freckles in finger length, our setup's going to be similar. Since the woman, no matter how we combine these gametes, we're only going to get little w, little s. We don't have to go ahead and draw out the big 16 squares, right? Since it's going to be the same for those other 3 columns. We can save ourselves a little work there. So that's what's represented by the gametes here. The man, however, can give these 4 different types of gametes. So as we combine those, we have a dihybrid here, right? We have dominant for both traits here, dominant for one, recessive for the other here, recessive for one, dominant for the other here, and recessive for both here. So we have a 1 out of 4 chance for any of these phenotypes that are represented. So the phenotypes given here were from that dihybrid cross, where we had 2 parents that both had big W, big S, little s. This shows the phenotypic ratio, the 1 to 1 to 1 to 1, when we have the test cross showing the results of a dihybrid for 2 traits crossing with a homozygous recessive individual for 2 traits. So notice how, even though we have slightly different traits in these 2 tables, that the results are the same. Let's do some practice problems. Attached earlobes are recessive. What genotype do children have if one parent is homozygous recessive for earlobes and homozygous dominant for hairline, and the other is homozygous dominant for attached earlobes and homozygous recessive for hairline? Okay, so with earlobes, we used E's earlier, and for hairline, we used W's earlier. So let's find out what information is given. So this one parent is homozygous recessive for earlobes. So if we're looking at that, we have parent number 1 here, homozygous recessive for earlobes, and homozygous dominant for hairline. So that's parent number 1. Parent number 2 is homozygous dominant for unattached earlobes. So parent number 2 looks just the opposite. So has unattached earlobes being homozygous dominant and homozygous recessive for hairline. So that would be a straight hairline. So here's the cross. No matter how we combined parent number 1 for these two traits, we can only get little e, big W, right? For the second parent, we have a similar combination, or we have a similar situation where no matter how we combine those, we only get big E, little w. When we combine those together for the child, because remember, a complete genotype for two traits will have 4 alleles. If we put that in the right order and we put the dominant allele first so that we don't get confused, we should get that, which is a dihybrid. If an individual from this cross worked just before, we have a dihybrid, reproduces with another of the same genotype, what are the chances they will have a child with a straight hairline and attached earlobes? We have a dihybrid. We could write it this way, or we could put hairline characteristics first. That doesn't matter so much as that we just have both characteristics represented. The cross is that we have 2 dihybrids as parents. And the question is, what is the chance that we're going to get a child with straight hairline and attached earlobes? So here, straight hairline is represented by little w, and attached earlobes, which is the recessive condition, is little e. So the question is, what's the chance of getting homozygous recessive for both traits? To work this out, we're looking at what are the gametes possible from the parents. So we could have big E, big W. We could have big E, little w. Looking down here, we could have little e, big W, or little e, little w. This is the gametes from one parent. We have the same genotype for the second parent, so we've got that figured out. So if we were setting up a Punnett square, this is one that would have to be 4 by 4. This parent number 1 would be up at the top here. Parent number 2 along the sides. So this is just like the Punnett squares we saw worked for 2 traits. However, we can save ourselves a little work here. We don't have to fill out every single square because we're just looking for a child with straight hairline and attached earlobes, which we said was going to be here. So that's straight hairline, that's attached earlobes. So if we're saving ourselves some work, we're looking at where this is going to combine with that. The only place that happens is right here. And so that's going to be 1 out of 16, which happens to be the answer. If this question would have asked, what's the chance of having a child with straight hairline and unattached earlobes, we could either work this out, or you could also look back at a chart that's already been worked out for a dihybrid cross and see what phenotypic ratio there is.